Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome back to the 4th ICANN-APAC TWNIC Engagement Forum. In this afternoon session, first of all, we're going to proceed to the plenary on security. In this session, we're going to focus on domain name abuse and how the regional community can work together to prevent domain name abuse. The moderator for this session is Ms. Ken-Ying Tseng, Managing Director of Taiwan Internet Governance Forum. Ms. Tseng heads the Digital TMT and Data Privacy Practice Group at Lee & Lee Attorneys at Law. She specializes in mergers and acquisitions, personal data protection, e-commerce, the laws of the internet, telecommunications, and technology. Ms. Tseng is frequently consulted by the Taiwan government with regard to personal data protection and artificial intelligence. I will now hand the floor to the moderator for the session, Ms. Tseng. Ms. Tseng, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone, whether you are here or online. Welcome to join us. This session is about DNS abuse, which is a very important topic for the ICANN community as well as all internet users. So I will first replay Edmond's slides to show the basic setting of the DNS abuse discussion context. Then I will ask each of the speakers, based on their experience and expertise, to give us some insight and thoughts on the recent trends of DNS abuse, especially in the perspective from regional collaboration. How different stakeholders can do something more to help to deter DNS abuse activities. So the next slide. So if you are familiar with ICANN, ICANN has defined DNS abuse as malicious use of domain name in certain way. Here you can see there are 5 special category of activities. That's they are phishing, malware, botnets, farming, and spam. And the spam is in the context of a vehicle of conducting the above 4 malicious activities by using spam. So these are the activities that ICANN is trying to combat and fighting against with. And in the internet community, there are different roles and the players and the stakeholders. Next slide. This is the DNS abuse ecosystem. Alban also showed this slide yesterday. We can see that there are so many different players and complex layers. For the blue ones, those are within the ICANN remit. And we can see there are registrar system, and also the registrant. But for DNS abuse, it will actually happen in different layers. And most of them are actually, as you can see from the yellow blocks, most of them are outside of ICANN remit. And also to the far end of the yellow blocks, the end user one, we can see that the end user, oftentimes they are actually receiving DNS abuse activities from the content layers, not from the infrastructure layers. So that's the whole ecosystem, and ICANN is committed itself to handle from DNS layer, not from the content layer. So that's the basic position of ICANN. So today we are going to discuss how different stakeholders are taking different measures and steps to fight against DNS abuse. So the first one, that's welcome Mr. Alban Kwan, and he's from CSC. CSC is a famous multinational brand protection as well as a domain name service provider. So that's welcome Alban to share with us his insight.
Thank you very much. So Now, if you follow the discussion about DNS abuse, you know that most of the time we've been talking about the definition of DNS abuse. And now we already talked about the definition from ICANN perspective. This is probably the most agreed definition at the moment. Now, this is basically the 5 elements that we already talked about. Now, but what I want to bring to you is that in EU, they released a study on domain name system last year, and they have a very different definition of DNS abuse, which has a much broader approach of it. Basically, they define DNS abuse as any activities that makes use of the domain name on DNS protocol to carry out harmful or illegal activities. As you can see, this is a lot broader. So last week, I was in Singapore attending the International Trademark Association annual meeting, and they also released a new definition of DNS abuse, which is this. This is Flash. They got approved by the Inter board just last week, and basically it is similar to the EU definition, and it is even broader, I would say, because it's basically any digital identifier which expand the scope into something of the future, like something like blockchain domain name that we love or hate. So this is really broad perspective. So personally, I don't think we need to kind of argue about the definition that much, but we have to understand why there are a lot of conflict between different parties in the definition. Let me show you 2 graphs to illustrate. So this is a graph. I think admin also bring out yesterday as well. So this is the trend line from ICANN DAR study, which is a report to review DNS abuse. So I probably won't go into details, but you can see a really clear downward trends about DNS abuse. So good news, maybe. But in the ICANN GAG meeting, someone from FBI also presented this graph as well. So this graph basically say that phishing attack as a whole increase rather exponentially, especially if you look at it from the impact perspective, and the kind of the bullish bar is the total complaints. So you can actually see the total complaint kind of stays stable, but not decreasing, stable, I would say. Impact expanding. So if you have a situation like this, it basically tells you that the community or the society as a whole still feels that DNS abuse or phishing attacks is a really major problem. They suffer more and more loss, exponential kind of growth in recent years as well. So you can see how this is a conflict of perception, which drive a different demand for a different definition of what DNS abuse actually is. Now, let me also show you this particular example, which I think would be rather interesting. So this is an example of a bank, and I hide the identity of the bank, of course, I have to do that. So now this is a phishing attack. I would presume that it is. So the website basically look exactly like the main website of that bank. Now, there's a sign-in button. You can see I make it a lot larger in the corner. Is it a phishing site? Is it DNS abuse? If it is phishing attack, it's DNS abuse. At the moment, the definition is that this is not DNS abuse because the phisher is careful enough to disable the sign-in button. When you click on that, it's just do nothing. So if it doesn't do anything, by definition, it's not phishing attack. It's basically just a brand abuse. Now, you can see from the community perspective, this was, for that bank especially, they don't need to talk about the definition of DNS abuse. All they see is that there's this. I need to take it down immediately because they don't know whether the next minute this particular sign-in button will be enabled, and some of their customer will suffer loss. Now, back to this again, I'm not trying to propose one definition over another, but I would hope to highlight in this conversation today that the reason why there is an argument about the definition is because these two graphs doesn't match. We have to somehow harmonize the two graphs that I show, and then we are able to release the pressure from the society and the government. Now, so I think I'll give 3 comments before I hand back to the chairperson. Now, the first thing I want to bring out is that who are the stakeholders in the multi-stakeholder model? If we're talking about a phishing attacks issue, DNS abuse, phishing malware, who suffer the most? Banks, of course, financial institutions. Are they in the multi-stakeholder at the moment? The answer is also no. We know that in the graph that Edmund presented yesterday, DNS abuse system is really complex. A lot of the stakeholders are not within the ICANN structure at the moment, so ICANN cannot govern them, so to speak, but they are stakeholder. CDN provider, they are being one of the most difficult player because if most of the phishing attack would use a CDN player to hide the identity, hide the actual location of the host. So we have to basically spend a few days to actually get through the CDN provider to get the name of the host, and then you contact the host to conduct a takedown. So this is a problem. Who are the stakeholders? Can we get them involved in the discussion so the conclusion would be a bit more meaningful? The other thing is we have to focus on the practical, not the definition. How can we actually harmonize the graph? And I think the third one, which is what I would like to propose, is that we have to also understand the real world is a commercial world. Now, one of the problems that I see at the moment is that we've tried to think about DNS abuse mostly from a social responsibility perspective. We think that the registrar, you're not taking down this particular phishing site, you're the bad guy. Now, I think this is not the right way to look into this particular issue. So the real problem, as I may present really quickly, is a cost transfer problem. The phisher, because of the phishing attacks, create a cost. And that cost transfer over to the brand owners, the commercial world, which suffer the loss, the banks and all that. Now these banks receive too many problems, it's too costly for them, to the customer, to the reputation. They need a cheaper, volume-driven solution to deal with this. They push this cost to take down service provider, anti-phishing company, brand protection firm, law firms, etc. And these law firms have no choice but to push this towards the platform on the intermediary, the registrar. Now, through bulk takedown, even if I know that this is not by definition, a phishing case, I'll push through as well. So this cost being transferred to the intermediaries, the registrars and registries. Registry have no choice but to suffer the cost because in terms of the ever-increasing cost to deal with the abuse, we have to hire more people to deal with abuse. And this is a problem. It's a commercial problem at heart. This is what I would argue. So going forward, I think one of the things is that we have to realize that this is not a social responsibility problem. It's a real cost problem in the real world, and we have to think about a solution where we cooperate together to reverse this cost transfer. So this is what I would like to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Alban. It's very insightful. I think based on what Alban said is, first of all, the current system does not protect brand enough, and most of the stakeholders are not aware that their rights are actually endangered. And in some way, they need to be urged to participate in ICANN's activity. So that's very important. And but I heard Alban seems to have some complaint against registrar. So next one, we will have a representative on registrar, Mr. Arnaud Franquinet from Gandi. So please share your view and the insight.
Thank you. So yes, in fact, who are we? Gandi is a registrar, a global one, because we are international, as you can see, with where we have the different activities, the business on all in the world. France is only 46%. But yes, we are a French one. We manage more than 2.5 million domains names. And we recently merged with Online, a Dutch company, and all of them together, we manage more than 5 million domain names. So it's a huge portfolio of domain names, so you can imagine. What is interesting is that we are on two markets, on mass markets and on corporate markets, helping large company to protect their brand. And DNS, for us, of course, is a huge issues with two kinds of problem. It's not the same for the mass market and for the corporates. For the mass market, it's more a question of reputation and robustness issues because of the volume. We have a lot of clients, you can imagine, with 5 million domain names. So it's more a question of reputation. And on the corporate side, with a large corporate accounts, it's more a question of quality, speed, and we are in the intersection with brand protection, DNS abuse, and in fact, from premium services we offer to our clients. As you see, we know the last 2 years huge growth on mass market and on corporate services with a double digits and growth. Just a quick focus on Asia, and especially on Taiwan, where we know very huge growth of our business, more than 25%. What is interesting is how we mitigate DNS abuse. That's why I want to share with you. In fact, we have two pieces of two corners of the pieces. One technical and one more human. By human, I mean more experienced facts. On the technical point of view, in fact, we have an in-house infrastructure. We try to build a safe island in this business with our own server in 2 European countries. It's a choice we made with our own DNS. So Gandi used its own DNS for more than 20 years ago. So it's a huge experience. We build this infrastructure and it's very resilient. We are in the top 10 DNS providers worldwide. It's a strong infrastructure, layers, with multi-transit providers and peering points all along the world to be sure that we can have the high-speed answer, but also to manage in case of phishing or what you want you can imagine. Of course, we have a huge instant provisioning zone, and our bandwidth is very large, with some potential to manage any attacks on the DNS we have. On the human side, we have pattern processes based on 20 years experience on credit card area. We know that from certain area or country, we can have some attacks. So we are be able to manage by anticipation some of these attacks. But especially, we have a dedicated teams, especially dedicated on security, ops, and trust and safety team. All together, they work very closely. They are connected with all the main player, all the stakeholder you can imagine in the industry. It's almost 10 people, and they work during 44 hours and 7 days. It's very important because to be able to manage any problem or abuse DNS, it's very important to respond very quickly to cut the problem. All the people are very experienced people, as you can see that. And we couple that with a very fast decision chain with freedom to make the decision close to the problem. So each people, very experienced in the team, could take a decision to manage very quickly any DNS abuse we can have on our system.
Okay, Arnaud would like to take a pause here, but from what he tells us is that technical support is very important, and Gandi is building a trusted place for its clients and the internet community. So the next one, I would like to invite Tom. Tom is from Net Chinese, and he has a very important role in the way that he participates in ICANN's RAA contract negotiation. So right now, everybody is so eager to know what's the result of the negotiation. So that's welcome Tom to share with us.
Hi, good day, ladies and gentlemen. I am Tom. I am with Net Chinese, and ICANN accredited registrar based locally in Taiwan. And I'll be providing some information on the ICANN Contracted Party House negotiating team on DNS abuse, or also known as the RA and RA amendments as well. And so far, the CPHNT was created in December of 2022 and involves the registrar stakeholder group and the registry stakeholder group. And to discuss the registrar accreditation agreement and the registry agreements with ICANN. And when the negotiation team was created, the goal was to complete the amendments within 12 months of the team's creation. And this is the first time that registrars and registries triggered the negotiations through ICANN process. And the amendments in this section will be targeted changes to the registrar accreditation agreement and the registry agreement on DNS abuse sections. And for all GTLD registries and ICANN accredited registrars. I personally believe that these amendments will be positive contributor and influence to make the internet safer, benefiting the internet ecosystem and its users. So far, the work of the negotiation team is on track, and personally, I am optimistic on the next step, which is public comment of the amendments obligations to be on time. And going to my next slide, that the estimated time will be between May and July of this year, 2023. Hopefully we can make it before ICANN 77. I believe many of the people on stage are eager to see the results of the amendments. And moving on, I'm just providing some insight that Net Chinese had observed on the ICANN model on DNS abuse mitigation. This is how we describe it. Firstly, there's the policy section. They provide, for example, the memorandums and also the agreements for registration. And also from the GAC also stated in some of its communiques that for what it wishes to protect and also to make the internet safer. And number two, you can see there's the ICANN contract compliance, which also requires the CPH to abide by the RA and RAA obligations. And also, they also provide waivers and also advisory guidance so that registrars and registries have a guideline on what to do to make the internet safer. And also, ICANN also has internal protocols on specific reviews on what it can do to make the internet safer. And fourthly, on DNS abuse monitoring, ICANN also provide many tools to monitor DNS abuse and also provide reports on DNS abuse. For example, they have DAR, the Domain Abuse Activity Reporting System, or the ITHI, the Identified Technology Health Indicators, or like lastly, the Domain Name Security Threat Information Collection and Reporting System. And then fifthly, the industry is also highly self-regulated. The GNSO also provide many information or many things that it wishes to the contracted parties can abide by. For example, they have a non-binding best practice to help registrars and registries to address abuse registrations. And also with CPH, we also have our definition on DNS abuse, or the Trusted Notifier Framework. And then for the registry stakeholder group, they also have the combating of DNS abuse for registry operators. And then for the registrar stakeholder group, they also provide a guideline for registrar abuse reporting practices. And lastly, the external alliances also create a platform for industry players to act on DNS abuse. And lastly, I would like to say that NetChinese is also eager to be a contributor to make the internet a safer place. We have joined WeProtect in 2022, and we established NetTalent in 2021 as a subsidiary of NetChinese. One of their responsibilities is to act on CSAM processing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Please return to your seat. So, Tom, you are a very good person and keep confidential information, right? I actually don't see any actual clause that you discussed to us, but if anyone want to ask more information from Tom, you can do so later on. So next one, that's welcome Valerie Heng from ICANN, and she has also an important task today. She's going to introduce us the new registration data request service that ICANN is going to launch later this year. So that's welcome, Valerie.
下午好, my name is Valerie from ICANN organizations. So we all know that timely access to domain name registrations is very critical for many people to help to fight infringement and malicious activity online. So now I will give an overview of ICANN Registration Data Service, in short RDRS. Non-public registration data include personal information, such as contact names, home email address, phone number related to a domain name under a generic top-level domains. This data was once public and easily accessible is no longer necessary published due to personal data regulations, protection regulations, and require requester with legitimate reasons to request it. So timely access to domain name registration is important, but needs to be carefully balanced with the rights of the data subjects as well. So what is registration data request service? It's actually a proof of concept that will handle requests for non-public registration data related to generic top-level domains. And this service will connect the requester with the ICANN accredited registrar. The participation from the registrar is voluntary. Why is the system being developed? It was proposed in response to the Generic Name Supporting Organization, GNSO Council, to implement a proof of concept system to gather usage and demand data. In February this year, the ICANN board directed ICANN to build this to develop this system and it will run for up to 2 years. So the usage and demands data will be shared publicly. The data will help to inform the ICANN board decision on next step of the registration data policy recommendations related to a system for standardized access disclosure in the interest of the community. So it also has the potential to influence a better tool to be developed that can connect the data requester and the data holder. So how will the system work? The system will simplify the process for submitting and receiving requests for non-public registration data. So it's for both the requester and the participating registrar to the use of a single platform. So the service will also standardize the process and data needed for the request. Registrar will determine whether the requester has a legitimate interest for the information. In terms of data disclosure, the service will not facilitate the delivery of the registration data or instructions to access the data to the requester. All communications and disclosure between the two parties will take place outside the system. Although the system will direct the request to the to the registrar, it will not deviate or change the applicable law. Registrars are responsible to review the data, to review the request and make decision whether to disclose the data. Who will use this service? It will be used by the participating ICANN registrar and requesters seeking non-generic top-level domains, non-public registration data. Registration is strongly encouraged but voluntary for the registrar. So requester with legitimate interest, including law enforcement, government agency, intellectual property and cybersecurity professionals and others. So what are the benefits for the registrar? By using the service, registrar will receive requests from one centralized platform with standardized form. Some registrars may not have their own processes to handle non-public registration data requests. So this service will be able to provide them with a standardized process. Use of the system could reduce the back and forth between the registrar and requester, and the need for registrar to educate the requester on what information you need to provide to evaluate the data request. It also has the potential to reduce the number of complaints registrar and ICANN receive in relation to the non-public registration data. So registrar will be able to access the data request through ICANN Naming Services Portal. It is a platform that's already in use by them. And the system will provide the registrar with email notifications when there's new requests. Then what are the benefits for the requester? So the service has the potential to be a one-stop shop for the requester looking to request GTLD non-public registration data from the registrar. But the caveat is it depends on the registrar participations. So requesters no longer need to look out the registrar to contact. The service will do that for them. And for many requesters, the system will ease the process for identifying the right registrar for them and guiding the right information they need for disclosing requests. It will be, instead of filling out different forms managed by different registrars, the requester only need to complete one standardized form through the service for the participating registrar. And the service will make it easy to upload the right documents needed by the registrar to review the request. And the requester will be able to see the pending and their past requests in one convenient place. The requester will have the ability to create new requests, use the standard template, and cancel requests in the system. How is the system being developed? It's being developed by ICANN organization, and it will leverage the existing ICANN system and tools. The development is on track for the November launch. This is when the requester may begin to submit requests in the system. And participating registrar will have an opportunity to onboard early in September with ICANN. So stay informed. ICANN will hold webinars to provide updates on this development. We will also conduct awareness campaign to potential users of the service within and outside of the ICANN community. We have multiple communication channels, such as the press release, media outreach. Social media will be used to reach the target audience. So please help to socialize awareness of the system. And the goal is to create a system that is helpful to our internet users. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. I actually personally participated in one of the webinar for the new RDRS demo. It looks really streamlined in the lean process. I believe that will facilitate the requests in the future so that the government officials, law enforcement authority, and the intellectual property professionals, they will find it's become easier for them to find the wrongdoer of all these domain name abuse persons. So that will certainly help us to mitigate DNS abuse. So the next one, our following speaker is Joy Zhang from TWNIC, and she is in charge of TW Search and CC. So let's welcome her to share Taiwan experience. Thank you.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to be here, sitting among all these wonderful talents to talking about domain name abuse. And the reason, as the chair said, is because I work for TWNIC. I'm also in charge of the project of TW Search. TW Search, many people categorize as in the cybersecurity world, which is true. But the cybersecurity, I have to say that the definition or the coverage has been so huge. So everything really related to domain name abuse is under it, okay? So when I hear earlier, the chair Ken-Ying started with a slideshow. Basically, it's a recap about what ICANN defines. What are the domain name abuse? The very first one is phishing. And then there's malware, there's botnet, there's a couple of other things else. And I have to echo that. The phishing has been a tremendous growth here in the Taiwan landscape. Gandhi, Arnaud just said that there's a tremendous growth in his world because they are commercial. They distribute the domain names. The more domain names he distributes, the more money he makes. And when there's more money it makes, obviously that's a very healthy sign. But there's more spend that's coming from all the different domains that's happening everywhere, okay? So sometimes we wonder that how come it's so easy for people to abuse the domain name, to use the domain name to do crazy things? And it's not just here in Taiwan. When I shared the landscape with you, that the work that we have been working on the TW Search for the past few years, we have seen the large growth in the domain name abuse. It's so easy to generate the domain name and use for a different purpose. And that the cost is very, very low. And you know, when we actually looking into it and working with the LEAs and others, that we realize that the life cycle for the bad domain name, for people who want to use the domain, is very, very short. So when we start to accumulate the evidence, the different things, why this domain name is bad and how can we take it down, and with all the proper process, that we have to work with our lawyers, work with the court, that's almost never catch up to take down those bad names. So there's really a lot of efforts that needs to be done. One, I think it's really that how everybody be aware of when you look at domain name, when you look at site, that how easy or how difficult it is to understanding that it is not the right one, and use it with caution. And one of the theory that I have heard was that because it's so easy to find a domain, to apply a domain, and to use for whatever the reason that is. So in order to kill them, probably the best way is not through those logical, legal, regular routine. Apply for the abuse, and then to find the evidence to take it down. It's really that how can we really to increase the cost to getting the domain name. So make them pay for the price. Make them, that's not so easy to use the domain name in the malicious way. I think that's also something that we can think about it, right? Another thing I think that we also have found was that because all the domains that's being abused per se, that's not using in the proper way, and we found out that there's obviously the spam or the phishing site that we can report. What are some of the things that they did terrible in order to take it down? But it takes a lot of the effort to go back and forth. So it takes a long time to take it down. So another thing that we did, which I think it's been mentioned in the previous plenary session, was the trust notifier mechanism. The mechanism is, to be honest, it's actually very simple. In the cybersecurity world, we often talk about a concept about trust. When you trust people, you understand that the information that you are getting is trustworthy. When you find some domain name or information that's not trustworthy, you should pay special caution to it. So this trust notifier is really between two parties. A good example that TWNIC did was with .asia. So we signed this trust notifier mechanism. So whenever that there is things with the top level domain name, something .tw, that we understand it's not a trustworthy domain, that we can pass to .asia, they can take it down, vice versa. So the concept is simple, that when we do have this, this relationship between the two parties, we can very easily, without a lot of the bureaucracy, so we can really take down some of the names. Things like this can happen really, really easy and very effectively. So then the question would be that if that's happening, then why are we not making this happening to other places, such as .com, which is obviously the largest top-level domain name that's being used. As you all know that in each region that we have the different assignment from, such as like in TWNIC, defines the top-level domain name of TW. For .com, it's really international. Everybody can use it. And so there are so many phishing names or spam names that's using .com. So how can we work with them? Obviously, they should be our primary target. If they have some working relationship with the trust notifier, it's a lot easier when we found some phishing site, found some abused domain name, we can ask them just to take it down or put some restriction on that so that things can be easier. So in Taiwan, that we look at the infrastructure hygiene is an important thing. And domain name obviously fall into that category. So hopefully my earlier sharing can give you some ideas about that. It's really aligned with what the chair said. The phishing is really highly ranked. Also, the domain name that's being grow very heavily. That we also see the spam that also has been happening here in Taiwan with the abused domain name as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joy. You mentioned one very important direction, because today's section is to find out how each different stakeholder can further collaborate, and trusted notifier should be one of the important one. So I would like to ask Alban to further share more about trusted notifier, how, in your experience, how this can help.
Oh, thank you. I think Trusted Notifier is definitely one of the most important initiatives in ICANN world, or actually any other online world, to counter the threats, infringements, or what, that is happening. In the EU, they have come up with a new law called the Digital Services Act, DSA. Within DSA, they mandate the social media giant, the internet giants, to establish a system called Trusted Flagger. So Trusted Flagger is basically the same as Trusted Notifier, in another word. Basically, they want the industry to be able to establish this kind of trusted system in order to speed up the whole takedown. Now, personally, I would say that the Trusted Notifier system would work really well under two circumstances. The first circumstance is that we can see the trusted notifier system actually reduce cost of the intermediary, of the registrar. So you have to transfer some of the cost of your in-house abuse team to evaluate the cases into the trusted notifier system. So you actually reduce costs. So there's an incentive for the registrars and registry to actually establish this kind of systems and support it. Now, the second important criteria is that we are able to, through the trusted notifier system, reduce the legal risk of the intermediary as well. So imagine at the moment, I think a lot of the reservation from the registrar community is that I don't want the definition to be too loose, because I see a lot of legal risk if the definition is too loose. But I think it's a moot point, because if we see this from a commercial perspective, establishing a trusted notifier system is actually going to reduce costs and reduce legal risk, and we want that to cover as much area as possible. So imagine at the moment if I complain to, say, I won't use Gandhi as example, GoDaddy, for example, and they are taking down a site. They have to consider whether this takedown is actually valid or not. Otherwise, they may feel that they face a legal consequence, so they would be conservative, right? So, but if just presume this is actually a wrongful takedown and a customer complaint, with a trusted notifier system, they can say, yeah, okay, I acknowledge that. This is a wrong evaluation by the trusted notifier system. We have to take this into account, and we have to amend the system to address this. So you can see how the legal risk actually being moved away from the intermediary into a system per se. It is similar to UDRP. You know, UDRP could be wrong, but it's not the registrar who actually conduct the UDRP. It's a third-party system that conduct the UDRP. So it removes the risk from the intermediary itself. So at the moment, I think this is two really important criteria. I think we, as a community, we have not really gone into details to discuss this, even if within ICANN. So I hope I give you my 2 cents on this.
Thank you, thank you. And I also want to invite Arnaud to provide further comment about trusted notifier. Did you ever actually use one, or how is it actually operate?
Well, in fact, we not really use one, but we are connected with a lot of different stakeholders. So, in fact, we have a kind of trustee fire. Well, it's very difficult because, as you mentioned, when we have when your client wants a domain names, we cannot take down before there is a bad usage of the domain name. So it's difficult for us. But we have some kind of tools like patterns. Of course, based what I say on credit card, on banks, and then on the area where the domain name is by. We also push some alert when for all our clients. We make some wrap up of if they buy a domain names, it's for the proper usage. So, in a legal point of view, when after we have any stakeholder who call us and say, you will have a problem with that, we have the tool to stop, in fact, and to take down the domain names. But we can take this decision, just us, because we are just an intermediary between a client and domain names. And everyone can have a domain name, even if it's if you don't use bad, you can have a mark, a brand without problem. If there is nothing from the brand.
Thank you. So what I heard is that you are constantly in a dilemma that to face your client and also the government and the law enforcement agency because they have conflicting requests.
Exactly.
Sorry, can I ask a quick question? So you talk about the contract review from ICANN. Can you give a little bit more details as to exactly what we're going to change in the contract? And excuse me, I would like to see, I know from your perspective, whatever we're going to change in the contract, so you will be liable to follow. Would you feel comfortable with it? So.
Okay. Basically, we're setting a bottom line for everyone to do, and not a ceiling. Okay. So, and also, it will be something which is within ICANN's remit, because anything outside ICANN's remit is against what it's able to do, so which will not be inside these amendments. And so from what I can say is that I'm sure many of us who are sitting here are already doing what is written or amended. And so I don't think there's much to worry to answer Kwan's question.
Does that mean the obligations of registrar will not be increased or not to worry?
As I said, it's a set of floor, which means enforces every single registrar to act on certain DNS abuse, the ones defined. But anything outside of that, we're setting a floor, as I said, not a ceiling. Okay, so anything else?
Still based on the 5 definitions.
It's all based on the 5 definitions. Yeah.
So would you have further questions for Tom?
Well, I was just going to make a comment to say that I understand that it's always difficult to manage something like this, which obviously could be controversial. But I guess your rule is really setting the bottom line and not setting the top. So it really depending, I guess, you give a lot of the freedom to each individual's, the registrar, to say that, what do you think is important? How much effort you want to put in to secure the infrastructure hygiene? So in another word, I think that leaders like GoDaddy perhaps wants to do more, simply because you have more customers, simply because you want to contribute as a leader to show that your integrity with the domain name abuse, which I hope is something that, as we mentioned when we're talking about domain name abuse, it's really something, I don't think it's an individual's responsibility, or it's more of a collaboration. The more that you can get people to align with you, the more works or initiatives that you can do. Obviously, GoDaddy, like how you have been operated, this is obviously a good opportunity. Like some of the things you mentioned earlier in your PowerPoint, that you are taking a lot of the initiative to do so.
So as long as each registrar takes certain basic steps, then they will be deemed as complying with the IA and IAA. That's what I heard. Or that's a best practice guidelines?
So far, as I said, setting a bottom line. So as long as you go by what is amended, you'll be compliant. That's from what I understand so far.
Okay. Valerie.
So the ICANN contract and policy cannot require the registrar to regulate content, for example, right? So, but they are not prohibited to disrupt the domain name for content reason. However, I think they only have the ability to take down the domain name and stop them from resolving in the system. And it will cause the mail or web servers to fail, right? So many registry and registrar I know have signed up for a voluntary framework to combat abuse, which states that they should act to disrupt the content if the domains are being used for child sexual assault material. Illegal distributions of opioid is a kind of drug online, human trafficking, and specific credible incitement to violence. So these are some of the voluntary framework that the registrar sign up for.
Sorry, as a lawyer, I want to clarify. You mean that I can does not require registrar to take action against illegal content, but registrar can voluntarily take action, and will not prohibit them from taking such actions.
For example, like we heard from admin.kids is doing that. Right?
Okay, well, that's good to know then.
So ICANN by law means that ICANN cannot regulate content. But I think this is also one of the issues that I raised in my part about multi-stakeholder model as well. And I think sometimes when we talk about this particular issue, it is artificially implemented limitation. 99% of registrar also provide hosting service. Hosting service provider have responsibility to look into the content of whether it is in violation of certain issues. So it's not like registrar, a pure pay registrar, and most registrar would abuse management team would be the exact same management team to handle both sides as well. So that's why I would say that sometimes we cannot be too limiting in terms of the definition of it, because in practice, it works differently as well. So I don't know whether I know you agree with me, but this is how I see this. When we build a system that works to reduce the actual DNS abuse, it will apply in more areas eventually, because it's in the best interest of the registrar to outsource this cost to the trusted notifier system, and you know that you will not self-limit to certain area as well in that sense.
I see. So Arnaud, do you have?
Yeah, right. We need to collaborate more with all web hosters and all these actors who regulate the content. Just for example, on all abuse cases we had at Gandi during 1 year, only third is linked with a pure DNS abuse. 2/3 comes from problem in contents, but we are not able to manage this content. Of course, if they are in our web hosting, it's easy, but it's not the case in the majority. So, right, we need to enlarge the collaboration and having a more stakeholder, also the web hoster, the telco could be good too, and having a more enlarging collaboration.
Thank you, Arnaud. I think actually each of the speakers has answered some of my questions, my prepared questions, because as a non-technical person, as a lawyer, I have always been wondering whether should limit DNS abuse to only 5 categories. So, but apparently, I think each of you think ICANN shouldn't be limiting that, but it seems that we don't need to do anything formal to expand that, because in reality, we will be dealing all different kinds of abuse activities, and the registrar just need to be responsible to take action against them. So then my next question would be in regard to regional collaboration. So we have been discussing about we will have a better registration data request system, and the trusted notifier will also be one of the solutions. And whether there are any other collaboration efforts that we can do to help to further mitigate DNS abuse. Whether any of you have any thoughts?
Maybe I'll jump in. Yes, I think we are really looking forward to have more discussions. I think the whole concept of trusted notifier is still in its infancy at the moment. We have the first cooperation between TWNIC and .Asia is extremely good. I'm hoping to see that this actually expand into different CCTLD and maybe some of the GTLD registry and registrar as well as part of this system. when we have a more formal system, we need a lot more rules to govern the relationship. So there will be more discussion required in terms of how do you evaluate whether a particular notifier is actually trustworthy or not, or something like that. But it is something that I think is extremely important. Personally, I am trying to talk to a lot of the CCTLDs as well to encourage adaptation on that, but still work in progress.
Thank you, Alban. And I have one question. I would ask each of you to do me a favor to do one exercise, because artificial intelligence has become the hottest topic this year. I have always been wondering whether artificial intelligence would be in any way help us to mitigate DNS abuse, or it is actually in the other side, it will increase DNS abuse activities. So maybe Arnaud, would you like to share your thoughts?
Well, in fact, it could be an increase, but it could also help us to reduce both. It depends how you use artificial intelligence, in fact. Of course, people who want increase malicious impact could have a bad use of artificial intelligence, but on the other side, we can use artificial intelligence to identify some comportment or some I don't know, patterns, to identify patterns, specific patterns, to alert us and to say that, be careful, in this case, you have more than 95% of abuse case. So it could help us too.
Well, thank you. Joy, would you?
Yeah, well, I think that just like any new technology, there's always good things to see the new technology, but it's really that how do people utilize that? So in this Chinese phrase that we say, 水能载舟，亦能覆舟, right? So the technology is always good, but it's the intention of people how to utilize it to their advantage that really makes a difference. So this may become a little philosophical, but I think it comes back to your thoughts, your mind about how do you want to make this better. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnaud.
Yeah, just to share with you, we develop, if you go on our site, we have artificial intelligence, in fact, inside our search bar, who can help you to find domain names in relation with what you search. We use it to try to identify the bad usage of domain names, or reverse usage of that. It's strange because only focus on the search of the name, we can identify at 60% sometimes that it's for the bad abuse. Only by the word used in the search. Because you have a lot of patterns, in fact.
So even with artificial intelligence, it's hard to tell. Okay. Valerie?
Mm-hmm. So it's a fair expectations on both sides. But when it makes sense, I can use the machine learning techniques to better understand the spread of the DNS abuse and analyze large data set repeatedly. So we use the technique to do that.
So I can already adopt it. And then it's good to know then. It's helping us now. So any other comment?
Not much opinion on that because it haven't happened yet. We don't know. But what I can tell is that in the domain name world, there's something called DGA, Domain Generation Algorithm, which is basically being used when a hacker hack into someone else's system. They use this to generate a random domain name to try to exfiltrate data out of that organization. So this kind of automatically generating domain name for attacks already happens. But what I would address is actually how do we actually counter even this kind of new threat. I think the overall principle is that we have to remember there's a particular law in the US law under the Communication Decency Act, Section 230, which established a really important principle for internet policy, which basically say that we all intermediaries should have indemnity as long as they act in good faith to remove any, they actually, very interestingly, they list out a couple of different issues, but at the end, they add a particular word, say otherwise objectionable. So otherwise objectionable is extremely broad. Not even illegal, objectionable. So this is being called as the foundation of the internet law, of internet policy. I think if we are able to find a way to maintain this kind of good Samaritan, good faith kind of work, whereas every intermediary really act in good faith, not only some in better faith and some in worse faith, everyone work in good faith, then we are able to encounter even the new AI, whatever threats.
Thank you, Alban. Tom?
I agree with everyone, what everyone said before me, is that technology in itself is neutral. So it is up to the user themselves that define whether AI is hostile or friendly. So personally, I would use it for friendly intent and also to defend, as I said, my company is also engaged in CSAM processing, maybe in that perspective. So this is my personal opinion on AI. Thank you.
Thanks. I think because Guowei has also been standing there, so I think it's time to open the question to the floor. So Guowei, please.
This is Guowei Wu, the chair of the TWICF. And basically, first is my comment. The comment is because this panel is talking about the DNS abuse. During the panel discussion, and I remember is the chair is talking about the content, or should somebody take action, and I'd like to take this time to make a simple comment about the domain name administration ecosystems. One of that actually, Valerie is already talking about it. ICANN is not taking anything about regarding with the content. And first of all is on the bylaw. And the second of all, I think is the most important, remember, regarding the DNS, we have two different kinds of the DNS. One is a GGTLD, one is a CCTLD. The ICANN actually have a limited power on the CCTLD, remember. The CCTLD is in a very sensitive area. Some other countries strongly argue the CCTLD is belong part of their sovereignty. And there is a ecosystem to be remembered that is one of the case. And if I remember when I was at ICANN board before, actually the human rights people coming to the ICANN public forum keep asking, is ICANN by law, we should add a statement, what is the human rights people like to, the ICANN will follow the human rights principle or whatever. And no matter in the ICANN board or in the community, we keep talking about that is, does that kind of principle is really happen in the ICANN layer. As you know, ICANN is doing the IP address assignment and domain name GTLD, CCTLD, and root server and INR function. We're actually talking many years where we can put this human rights principle in there. And a similar thing is, should we put the content also under the so-called ICANN discussion, the community discussion? And I believe, I would say, most of them, well, let's say the GNSO, CCNSO, ASO, and they don't think the content is under their control, And another thing I like to particularly make a comment is a lot of people may be a little bit confused about the governance. ICANN is not international treaty organizations. And usually I say that ICANN don't have a military. ICANN do not have a police. We cannot do usually a state can do. And what ICANN can do is only based on the contract. The contract with the GTLD registry, the contract with the registrar, But outside of the contract, it's really very limited power what is ICANN can do. And then you might be asking then what ICANN can do. And that, I think you are in the ICANN community long enough, you know that. ICANN almost every year talking about accountability. The accountability is a mean all the participants, all the membership in the ICANN. We all agree, so that's the reason consensus is so important for us. Consensus sometimes is more powerful than law, So I think this is my first comment when we talk about the domain name abuse, what we can do. Then I have two questions. The first question, actually, Alban, you're talking about those of the cost transfer. You have a very lovely slide showing those of the cost transfer. And if you follow that cost transfer, it seems like this guy pushed to the other one, and this one pushed to another one, and then coming back, it's kind of circle. And so when we are trying to resolve the DNS abuse, I think you're also talking about the DSA, right? Then my question is, that in the 2016-2017, the EU have a GDPR. And GDPR is trying to fight with the data protection or privacy issues. But today is 2023. Is anybody try to assessment how the GDPR really reduce the privacy or data protection or data violation, because almost every day we continue hear the data was still misusing, that kind of cases. If the GDPR is pushing so many years, doesn't have a real effective solution, how much we can count on the DSA to control or help resolve what you are talking about with the DNS abuse or whatever abuse?
I cannot answer that question. I do not know anyone actually did a research on the effectiveness of GDPR. But what I mean
the DSA.
DSA has not yet been implemented, so it's really hard to evaluate as well. But I think some of the idea in DSA is innovative and has some positive, like the trusted flagger. They have not yet defined exactly who can qualify as a trusted flagger yet. So that's really the missing part, and I would say that the devil's in the detail. So that's really will make or break the whole, idea. But I could quickly comment that after GDPR and the WHOIS reduction, I think from a law enforcement and cybersecurity investigation perspective, it has become extremely difficult, and it has given rise to more domain name abuse. We can see in the recent news that more people are trying to use domain hijacking, phishing attacks, these kind of things as an attack vector. To some benefits of us because people are more aware of domain security, but overall it's becoming a lot more difficult. So the system from ICANN would be extremely important to actually see how we can get more information.
So Arnaud, you know, okay. So there's a lady in the back, so maybe.
Go ahead. I saw you have another question want to ask. Okay, so this is Dora from on behalf of NetTalent, and I also want to ask Alban. Sorry that make you so busy to answering a question. You have mentioned that the cost transfer, it seems to be a key problem, so that registrar, registry, or relevant stakeholders must, have to pay attention to these issues. So from your personal perspective, how to solve this cost issue? Like any suggested solution?
Thank you. I don't have a definite answer, but I can give you my perspective in a sense that I think trusted notifier system is the most important answer. As I mentioned, the cost transfer happens with a sequence, and basically we don't see the return at the moment, like the other way around at the moment, because basically registrar, registry in the domain name context basically eat up all the cost. So you guys have like 10 people, some may have more people, there's a cost for them, and as we only have a limited amount of person, then that means limited amount of time. Now what I can tell you is that in the anti-counterfeit world, like one platform told me that each person have a daily quota of dealing with 500 cases per day. So if you divide 500 cases per day within their working hours, they only have 2 minutes to deal with a case. So no wonder they ignore our complaint. So what needs to happen is that we establish this trusted notifier system. We pass on, so what the registry and registrar give to the trusted notifier system is efficiency. So we get efficiency gain, and we pass that efficiency gain back to the brand owners. And then because now in a phishing attack example, the phishing attack only takes like an hour or 2 hours to take down, then the phisher suffer the cost. They have to first register the domain name. They have to launch the campaign. They have to do whatever, email, mass email and whatever. They waste all the efforts because the domain name got shut down in 2 hours. So the costs get transferred back. That's my answer to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alban. We have a gentleman here, so let's take this one last question, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, speakers. I'm a graduate student of National Taiwan Normal University, and my research field is artificial intelligence and information security. So I would like to ask whether ENS is one of the solutions to DNS abuse for the currently decentralized Web3 development, and for the development of blockchain such as smart contracts. What is your opinion of the development of Web 3.0? Great, thank you.
Who can? A very difficult question for the panel.
Maybe I'll try first, and then the other can chime in. The answer for me personally is absolutely not. Will basically increase the level of abuse tremendously, basically. Within the traditional domain name system, we have some sort of contract obligation. We have some kind of governance structure in place. In the new domain name, there's absolutely nothing. You have absolutely nothing. They are new to the business in the sense that they haven't really think through these things at the moment, in my opinion. So if the alternate domain name become popularized, it has not been as yet. If it's being actually used, you'll see that the phishing community is going to flood over there, and there's no governing law or guidelines or anything like that. And the whole decentralized self-governing model is also part of the problem, because one of the principles under the kind of the blockchain community is that I don't take care of anything. Everything have freedom to do anything. So in principle, they would have a lot of pushback even from their own supporter to actually enforce on anything. So you're going to see a lot more problems. And it's not the answer. It will be a much bigger problem.
Can I make a short comment?
Yes, please, in 3 seconds, please.
Very short. Yeah, I think basically for the question is, first of all, if you follow the current ICANN structure, this DNS administration structure mechanisms, at least you can find the liability. If something happens, you know who going to responsible for. The difficulty of the blockchain DNS, what is the liability? Who we can complain to? That is a little bit difficult. So I think no matter it's a blockchain DNS or of any kind of blockchain application, we have to ask us one question: how you can build the liability in their structures? If you don't have a liability structure there, then there will be generated, not chaotic, but a little bit confusing. So I think that's one of the general, is personal comment about that kind of a technology.
Thank you, Guowei. So we should trust ICANN and join ICANN. No? Okay, I made the wrong conclusion. Anyway, I think that thank you for all the speakers, give us wonderful speeches and this section. So this session is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tseng, and thank you to all panelists for this very informative session. Please take a step forward. We are going to have a group photo.